Why would anyone spend 30, 40, 50 plus dollars on a vinyl record when they can stream the exact same music virtually for free? I got asked this question recently. Figured I'd bring the discussion here on this episode of Talking About Records. My name is G.I. Sanders from NTX Vinyl, a small chain of independent record shops in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. If you're not local but you are in the US, you can shop online at ntxvinyl.com and would love it if you'd subscribe to our channel here on YouTube and follow us across social media at NTX Vinyl on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Let's talk about streaming versus vinyl. So, as I mentioned, I got asked this question lately when someone asked me what I did. Of course, I told them I own a record shop. We got into a brief discussion around it, and this was a person who honestly was completely naive. They had no idea records were still being made. The brief discussion we had, I got into the details around, records are being made again, and got a little bit into like the resurgence of vinyl and the cost of vinyl and those types of things. It wasn't a long-winded conversation, but it did get me thinking. I answered it pretty succinctly when within this brief conversation, and I hit on a couple of these points, but in reality, to me, it comes down to basically convenience versus commitment. That's really what it is in my eyes when you talk about streaming music versus playing a record, owning and playing a record, right? So first of all, I stream music all the time. I have a Sonos system throughout my house. It's amazing. I love it. I've had it for years. So I will pull up music and stream it all the time. You cannot beat the convenience of it. I don't care if you're talking about Apple Music or Spotify or YouTube or Pandora, whatever streaming service you use. It's either virtually free or free, whichever way you look at it. Maybe it costs you $10 a month, $15 a month. Maybe you're using a free service supported by ads. Regardless, it is very, very cheap and affordable, accessible, and convenient. I don't think that argument can really, I think it's pretty indefensible argument in regards to the convenience of streaming. The fact that I can leave my house with my phone in my pocket and carry around all of the music, most of the popular music that's ever been released in the world. Like, that's an amazing thing. And I don't discount that at all. So from a convenience perspective, to be able to pull up any artist, pull up any album, stream it, shuffle it, cherry pick songs, all those things are great. The other thing that I think is a really great benefit of streaming is music discovery. I hear it all the time, and I do it all the time. Hey, check out this band, check out this album. Well, maybe the album's not out yet. Maybe, I don't have time to, go to a record store and seek it out at that moment. So maybe I'll add it to my library and stream it at a later date. Check it out, get a taste for it. Maybe at a later time, I may want to commit to it if I like the album a lot, and maybe do want to drop some money on owning a physical format, right? So I think convenience is huge. Music discovery is huge. In the end, most of the time when I'm streaming music, it's background. I've got people over the house, I'm hanging out, I'm mowing the yard, I'm doing stuff where I'm moving throughout the house, and I can't commit to sitting in one place and flipping a record, one side and the other, right? So it's mostly a background experience for me. It doesn't have to be. I'm sure there are plenty of people who sit down and just stream music and listen to it, but that's not the way I really use it. And I know a lot of other people I've talked to have kind of said the same, because the reality is when you push play on something and it's streaming, regardless if it's streaming throughout your home or in your car, from a little, to a little Bluetooth speaker, wherever it may be, there's very little commitment level for you as a listener to really stay engaged with that, because you can get distracted so easy. You can leave the room, you can, just change to another song right away or another album. You can shuffle it. You can, if you're in your car, you can bounce between streaming and radio or different streaming services for that matter. There's just lots of options. And to me, that's when you start to get into a little bit of the fatigue of streaming, and there's certainly a fatigue for myself on scrolling. It's the same thing with streaming services when it comes to television or movies. Like, you sit down, you try and find something to watch, and 15 minutes later, you found a lot of decent options, but you never really committed to anything. And now 30 minutes have gone by and you're like, I don't even have time to watch anything anymore. There's just too many options. It's the same thing with music for me personally. I will go to my library all the time. I'll just scroll hundreds and hundreds of albums. No idea what to pick. It's just overwhelming. Same thing as if I go to, try and find something new, I'll go to new releases or go to recommended albums, which in theory is a great idea for music discovery, but in reality, I usually just get completely overwhelmed and usually go to what's I've recently added and just pick the same thing that I've listened to a lot over the course of many weeks or months or whatever. Maybe that's just me, but I definitely get fatigued from the amount of choices available when it comes to streaming music. So that's actually a positive and a negative. Like, it's great to have access to all the music in the world, but man, it's overwhelming, and I really feel that when it comes to streaming music. So as I get into vinyl and my perspective there, I think the reality here is, if you're looking at this as an either or thing, or why someone would pay money for music on a vinyl record versus streaming, it really comes down to what's important to you, right? Is it that convenience, or is it that commitment, right? So let's talk about vinyl. And again, this is just how I experience how I experience a vinyl record, how I choose to listen to it. You may be completely different, but for me, there is a commitment level. And I actually look at that as a very positive thing. If I'm going to drop really any money, $20, $30, $40, $50 or more on a record, there is a level of obligation there that I better really want to own that record. I better know that I like that record on some level. I'll take chances every now and then, but that money that I'm going to put down puts a pressure on me mentally that I want to listen to this thing. Like, I want to get my money's worth out of this thing. And that obligation and that commitment, like, that's important to me. And that's part of what I like about vinyl records, and I like about the format specifically, or any physical format. But for me, vinyl is the one I choose. So that expense really is a part of the obligation. And then when that record shows up in the mail, or when I get home from the record store and I have it, like, I have an excitement level to drop the needle on it and sit down and really engage with it and listen to it. I don't really feel that with streaming ever. Again, just me personally. But when a new album drops, I don't own it on vinyl yet. It comes out, I'm looking at it on my phone. I'll add it to my library. Maybe I'll go walk the dog and I'll stream it once. But it's like, again, I'm doing other things. I'm not really focused on it, and I don't feel committed to stream it because it's there whenever I want it. It's there for the taking. It's completely convenient. So again, with a physical format, I actually like that burden in some ways is on me to actually get my money's worth and listen to that record. I think that's a really important thing. And what that inherently does for me personally is it makes me feel more connected to the artist. Like, if I'm going to sit down, no different, well, a little different than going to see an artist, live. For me, and I've said this before, for me, a record and a physical thing that you own and can hold and can touch and can dive into and engage with is the next best thing to getting to see that artist live, right? It's their art in a physical form that they have put their blood, sweat, and tears into. The same music, the same audio, to a certain extent, is available on streaming services, but I don't feel that obligation. I don't feel that commitment, and I don't feel that connection to the artist like I do when I spin a record. So, and of course, what goes along with that is you're actually supporting the artist. Like, that's a big thing here. Like, let's make sure everyone understands that only the top tier artists in the world actually make any money off streaming. The vast majority of independent artists, middle of the road artists, working musicians, they don't make any money off streaming. It is pennies per year compared to what they used to make when physical formats were the primary way people consume music. So I of course love the fact that I can add an album, I can spend money on an album, I can add it to my collection, I can enjoy it, and I know that I'm supporting the artist on some level. There's a lot to unpack there in regards to the mechanics of how much an artist makes on a specific vinyl sale versus a streaming artist, but I can assure you that most artists make a lot more money on physical forms of not only music, but also merchandise and those types of things versus, streaming revenue. So I think that's important. And then, of course, I own it. Like, don't forget, like, that's a big thing. Like, streaming services, it's a rented subscription. You're paying 10, 15 bucks a month, or maybe it's free with ads. And it's some huge multi-billion dollar tech corporation that owns that app, that owns the device that you're using it on. And it owns all of that content. They're in control of it. It could go away at any moment. I don't necessarily think streaming's going anywhere. Sure, there are blips of certain artists who will pull their stuff off one platform or another, but in general, there is a massive amount of content, music, to consume on streaming services. And, you don't own any of it. It's all there and can disappear at a moment's notice. And again, I think for me, the fatigue of having that many options and having that much music is completely overwhelming. So I think that's important. But beyond all of that, the most important thing to me is the experience of listening to a record. Being able to sit down, being forced to sit down and pay attention is very, very important to me. Having a dedicated space obviously helps. I think that's very key. Being able to hold the record, look at the album art, look at the gatefold, look at the liner notes, read about who produced it. Again, I can do all that stuff for the most part. I can see it all online. I can pull up my laptop or my phone and look at little pictures of it, or I can go to Wikipedia and read about it, like these types of things. But being able to sit and hold the thing I bought and that I now own, that artist worked so hard to produce, like, that's a real thing, and that's a part of the experience. The visual of the album is also really critical to me. Again, I've committed to it. I'm sitting down, I'm listening to it. I can display it. I can see it on my turntable. That's all very important. To me, streaming disappears. It's gone. It's in the background, which sometimes can be great. But most of the times, if it's an artist I really love or an album I really want to dive into, like, I don't want it to be invisible. I want to be able to see it and touch it and feel it. And that's critical to the experience of listening to vinyl for me. Even just choosing an album, thinking about, again, the scroll fatigue of what to play, or thinking about versus going into your record store and digging through the bins. Like, there is a joy there. And if you're a record collector, I don't have to tell you that. The excitement of walking into a store and not knowing what you find. Maybe you'll walk out empty-handed, no different than when you're streaming and just give up, or just shuffle because you're tired of trying to make a choice. But the excitement level of discovering something that you didn't know you needed, or that you haven't seen in years, or that just looks cool, like, those experiences I think are heightened, and I think they happen more often than when I'm scrolling through my phone at all the streaming music, right? So I think that's very critical. And the same experience, at least for me, with a larger vinyl collection, but I think it can be the same even if you've only got 50 or 100 records or whatever. Choosing from your own collection, like, believe me, I am constantly surprised at what I'm listening to, because I'm going through my collection and I've got a lot of records, and it's like, oh man, I haven't listened to this in years. Oh, I totally forgot about this. Now, can that happen on a scrolling streaming device? Well, of course it can. But for me, it's a lot more enjoyable and rewarding when I can go to my collection and pull something out that I haven't heard in a long time, that I probably never, ever would have clicked on if I was looking and scrolling through a streaming service. But the fact that it's on my shelf and I can kind of rediscover it, I think that's very, very important. You will notice that one thing that I didn't even touch on yet is sound quality. A lot of people will just say, oh, the reason why vinyl is better than streaming is because it sounds better. It sounds, way better because it's an analog format. Well, I for the most part, that's kind of BS for most people. If you're listening to records on, a turntable and a Bluetooth speakers that cost a couple $100, you may be perfectly happy with that, and that is totally fine. But I don't believe that you're going to get a much different sound quality, a more a warmer feel from a $100 turntable or even a $500 turntable. I don't know. Your ears are different than mine, so all of that varies. But the point is, until you get to like a legit, I don't want to say audiophile because that word's kind of like, yeah. But until you get to a certain level, whatever that, and that level's different for everybody. And I went through this, like the sound doesn't really come into play, which is why I've left it till last, because until you really invest in vinyl as an experience and as somewhat of a lifestyle, because it takes up a lot of time, it takes up a lot of money, you got to really commit to it. So it is a lifestyle. Until you can really commit, with your sound system, in addition to your record collection, I don't think sound really comes into play. Now, when you do commit and you do get properly set up, it absolutely can be a big differentiator from streaming. I don't have a $100,000 sound system by any means, but I absolutely love the sound of listening to a record in my room. I think it's warmer. I think it's more dynamic. Part of that is because I've invested in better speakers and a nice turntable and all those things to allow for that to be possible. Even though I've got like I mentioned, I've got a great system throughout my home on Sonos, but they're little Play One speakers that are hanging in corners around my house. They sound good when good enough. But is it the same experience from a sound perspective of sitting in my room and really engaging and listening? No, it's not. And I think the sound quality shows through in circumstances like that. But again, that's different for everybody. So that's why I kind of put sound last on the list, because I think you got to build up to that. Most new collectors, in my opinion, are kind of fooling themselves if they think they're getting a drastically better sound than streaming or CDs even, or tapes on a vinyl record, if you've got just a kind of a starter system. And there's nothing wrong with that. Everyone starts somewhere. I did. Everyone did. You did. Like, everyone starts with a basic turntable and a setup and some cheap speakers or whatever it may be, and then you ramp up over time. So again, I really think this comes down to like I said, what's important to you. Is it the convenience? Is it the commitment? And really, it's what you want to get out of the music. Like, for me, music is so important and such a critical part of my life and who I am, and brings so much joy to myself and everyone around me. Like, I'm willing to commit and I'm excited to do it. And if it takes $30, $40, $50 a record, well, of course I wish it was cheaper, but in reality, it makes it more important because I am spending a little more. I have to be choosier about what I buy. I have to be, now that I'm getting a large collection, I have to be choosier about what I want to add to my collection because I'm out of space, and you may be in the same boat. Everyone runs out of space, whether it's 1 cube or 4 cubes or a whole damn room. Eventually you're going to be out of space, and you got to make some choices, difficult choices about what you want to own. And so those are all the things that make this, again, an experience, and they make it a lifestyle when you're talking about, choosing to commit to vinyl as a format versus kind of just clicking the shuffle button on your phone. So there you go. That was my very long-winded answer that I had with the gentleman who asked me that question. He got the Cliff Note version, you got the long version. So I'd love to hear feedback about what you think about how you use streaming in regards to, being a complement to your record collection, or maybe you don't at all. Maybe you just listen on a physical format, which is cool too. So love to hear feedback, love to hear comments and your questions as always. My name is G.I. Sanders. This has been Talking About Records, and we will see you again next time.